Good evening, you're watching Estuary News. Coming up, a war story is brought to life on screen. Reflections this week is from Lee McMunn, Associate Minister from St John Newland in Hull, and we uncover the history of the YMCA in Grimsby. Welcome to Estuary News, I'm Hugh Richards. Time now for the news headlines.
The public consultation on what to do with Hull's Beverley Gate has now closed. The options given to the public are to either fill in the historic site and cover with a green space while still preserving the walls in situ, or alternatively keeping the site accessible to the public and enhancing the wall's current positions. The final decision will be sent to the Hull City Council Planning Committee early in the new year. In the last year, local councils in Yorkshire and the Humber have been inundated with over 26,000 requests for help from people on the brink of homelessness, new analysis from Shelter has revealed. The shocking findings based on government statistics show that the number of requests has risen by 54% in the last 5 years. Last year, over 3,000 households in the region were made officially homeless. The Grimsby Care Home received special visitors to celebrate its refurbishment. The Mayor and St Nicholas looked around Bradley House Care Home, which the Care Quality Commission said required improvement after an inspection earlier this year. The home's managers say a lot of work has been done to transform the home and improve residents' quality of life.
There was some issues with the home. We are inspected by the Care Quality Commission and it was recognised that some improvements needed to be made. We also wanted to improve the life of the residents.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. We have had every room decorated, new carpets, new curtains, a new activity room, which we're in now. We also appointed a new activity coordinator that's doing some activities with the residents as well.
Whiting Mill on Hesel Foreshore is set to be restored thanks to a Heritage Lottery funding. The mill sits within the Humber Bridge Country Park and can be seen from the A63 and the Humber Bridge. The project aims to carry out essential conservation work to the Grade 2 listed mill building and construct an accessible pathway from the Tourist Information Centre to the site. East Riding of Yorkshire Council have been awarded £36,000 to further their bid for full funding. And Humberside Police are appealing for the victims of a crime in Bridlington to come forward. A man has been interviewed by the police for trying car doors in the Tennyson Avenue area of Bridlington, and whilst being questioned has admitted to recently stealing 2 car stereo fascias in the same area. And that's all the news for now. You can contact us by calling news@Estuary TV or by calling 01472 315553. That's all for now.
Last year, a film called Tell Them of Us told the story of a group of soldiers from the village of Thimbleby in Lincolnshire who fought together in the Battle of Passchendaele. The film's researchers and producers found that one of those soldiers, William Crowder, had many more stories to tell, so a film was made telling the rest of his war story, as Dave Nunn went to find out.
He's one man who was part of a cog in the turning wheels of history. William Harrison Crowder was one of a group of soldiers from Thimbleby in Lincolnshire, fighting on the Western Front in France in 1918. The Crowder family story was told in a film made last year called Tell Them of Us, about the death of William's brother Robert in the Battle of Passchendaele. Now the film is getting a follow-up called William's Story, about the extraordinary event William found himself in after a major German offensive in spring 1918.
In 1918 he was involved in the first day of the German spring advance on March 21st. He was out in a forward observation post with 3 or 4 Scottish telephonists and a junior lieutenant when the Germans came over in their thousands. And he was the first person to send a report back to brigade that there was actually an advance of troops behind a very severe barrage of artillery which started at 5 o'clock in the morning. His last message was about 10:30 in the morning. The line went dead and everyone assumed that he was either captured or killed.
William was captured in the ensuing battle and was sent to a prisoner of war camp at Groudend in what was West Prussia. He stayed in Groudend until the end of the war, where he made it home to Lincolnshire for Christmas in 1918. Nick Loven, who directed both Tell Them of Us and William's Story, says the second film was a lot different to film and changed focus from the family left behind to living with the effects of what happened during the war.
Very different to the first film, because the first film we wanted to really tell the story from the perspective of the family left behind, because that's the sort of story that doesn't get told very often. In the second one, as well as covering his life after the war, we wanted to go in depth into what he went through, at least one of the things he went through when he was captured on the front lines. And so being able to do that, or choosing to do that, was quite difficult.
For the film's producer, William's story was the opportunity to take the sadness and anguish suffered by millions during the war and tell it on a more personal and emotional level.
I felt that the First World War is so traumatic. The numbers of dead are just so hard to comprehend. It's so vast and so horrific that I wanted to take a small story, just one story of an ordinary man, and tell his story in a very personal way, because it's much easier to relate to the sadness and sorrow and tragedy of one small group of people than it is to the thousands and millions who were affected.
Nick says that stories like William's are important to tell and transcribe for millions to see. He says that with direct first-hand accounts running out, it's important to preserve these stories for history.
So I think, particularly now when we are losing so much of the living memory of the time, there's soon will come a time when even World War II, there's nobody alive who remembers it, and so it's important to try and capture these memories and keep them alive.
You're watching Estuary News. Still to come, it's time for another weekly reflections, and we'll have all the latest sports news and results. Dave Nunn is with me now on the sofa to tell me a little bit more about that fascinating film you've been covering there.
So yeah, the film obviously is called William's Story, and it's actually a sequel to a film called Tell Them of Us, which was made last year, and that follows the story of the group of soldiers from Thimbleby in Lincolnshire, went off to the First World War, went and fought, and quite a few of them died in the Battle of Passchendaele in 1917, but obviously, as we alluded to in the package, William Crowder survived.
This is one of the Lincolnshire Chums regiments, wasn't it, the Lincolnshire Pals regiments. How long did he survive? He obviously survived the First World War. What happened to him after that?
Well, he carried on fighting through the war up till the German Spring Offensive of 1918, which was called the Kaiser's Battle. And what happened is the essence of this offence was to try and outflank the British Army at the Somme, defeat them there, defeat the French, and then obviously get a tactical and military victory. It didn't quite work out like that. They only got a tactical victory. The military victory obviously didn't happen because the Germans couldn't supply their frontline soldiers, so they quickly ran out of steam. But what happened to William was that he was on the front line of this offensive. He was in an enlisting post with his CO, which was apparently some Scottish guy whose name I can't remember.
That's all right, fair enough.
And he was relaying messages back to the command when a massive ton of German soldiers came running towards them, and the communications line went dead, and people thought he'd been killed, but he actually survived and got taken to West Prussia to a camp called Graudens, which was a prison camp. And that name might sound familiar, because it was also the site of a Nazi concentration camp during the Second World War.
That would have been 25 years later.
25 years later, yeah. But he got taken to the Graudens prison camp in West Prussia in Poland, where he served out his time in 1918.
Well, I mean, just first of all, a couple of details there. That communications post, that listening post, there's no radio then. This was in the days when somebody had to go and bury a wire from the command post to wherever the observation post was, which was tricky, dangerous work under fire.
Yeah, especially in a battlefield as well, when you've got mortar shells landing around you and all gunfire coming past you. I can't imagine it would have been a very pleasant job, but of course someone has to do it. It's a vital job to do as well, because how are you supposed to communicate back what's happening to the command if you don't lay a line? So.
Command and control, got to keep command and control. But so it's 1918 that he was captured, that he was taken prisoner. So it wasn't much left of the war for him to have to sit out. He was only in captivity for a brief while.
No, well, the offensive started in March 1918, the German offensive, and he was captured very early on. And he made it back to Thimbleby in time for Christmas, 1918. So if you plot it out, the war ended in November, so he must have been in there for a fair bit of time.
Well, a matter of months,
Yeah, a matter of months.
Not a great deal of time.
But I suppose no one wants to be in a prison camp for that long anyway. So.
Well, but of course, and the reason that tactical advantage that the Germans had in that final push of 1918 was destroyed by the strategic collapse of their support logistics back home, and that effectively there was no Germany for them to continue fighting for. The regime had imploded. And that was how the war was won. It was the political disaster in Germany rather than any sort of military.
Which worked out well for us, because I know the Germans were probably outnumbering us at that point as well, especially after some of the nasty battles we'd been in by that point in the war as well.
Well, and especially when the Russians had pulled out after the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in 1917.
You certainly know your history here.
We're getting a bit grand strategy here. Let's get back to our man. He survived the war. How did he spend the rest of his life?
He lived out his life in Thimbleby, Lincolnshire. He married, he married, I can't remember the woman's name now, but he met her before the war, this woman, and he married her. And he lived out his life till 1977 when he died. So he lived for a very long time.
And he must have been, in his 70s or 80s when he died?
Yeah, he was in his 20s when he was in the events of William's story.
It's just that the original film, Tell Them of Us, of course you'll recognise the quotation, it's Simon Idie's memorial, Tell Them of Us, passer-by, that at their word here we lie, the memorial to the Spartans at the Battle of Thermopylae, as I'm sure you already knew, Dave.
I definitely knew that.
Thank you very much for coming in. Sounds like an absolutely fascinating film. I look forward to seeing it.
Thank you.
Join me after the break when Lee McMahon, Associate Minister of St John Newland, brings us reflections, and we'll have all the latest local sports news and results. Welcome back, you're watching Estuary News. Still to come, we head to St John Newland and Hull for reflections, and we'll bring you all the latest local sports news and results. A project at a local YMCA aims to uncover more of the past. The YMCA has been in Grimsby for over 100 years and it has a rich history. However, there aren't that many archives left from the past detailing what life was like at the YMCA in the early 1900s. We want to find out about the project, which aims to find out more about the YMCA's past.
It's an organisation with roots stretching back over 100 years, founded to provide young men with healthy activities in their spare time. Now the YMCA is a huge global organisation with branches all over the world. Now the YMCA in Grimsby has launched a heritage project alongside the Cadbury Research Library aimed at preserving the past.
The Cadbury Research Library holds the archives of the national YMCA, and although we hold some records of local YMCAs, we have only got a bit of information about Grimsby and Cleethorpes. So we're hoping that this project will help to build a better picture of the YMCA activities in this area over the last 100 years.
The Rich History Project is aiming to catalogue the history of the YMCA in Grimsby over a 109-year lifespan, with the bulk of the work involved in the project being done by young people.
Well, the Rich History Project is very simply to research and record the history of the YMCA. It's been in Grimsby since 1906, and there's some evidence that people were playing a part in the national YMCA in the 1850s. So the idea is for the young people to research using a variety of research methods, including going to the University of Birmingham where the National Archives of the YMCA are held, to put together that story, to identify the sort of critical points throughout the YMCA's history, identifying critical people involved.
Not only is it the chance for the archivists at the university to gain valuable materials to add to the YMCA National Archive, but it's also a chance to teach young people about archiving skills.
I also think that this project is also valuable because of the involvement of different community groups and of young people. So as part of the project, we're going to host visits for the young people and the other volunteers, so that they can come to Birmingham, they can view the National Archives that we hold at Birmingham, and they can receive some training on handling archive materials and how to go about undertaking this sort of research.
The YMCA hopes that this project will spark an interest in history and aims to produce a book and film archiving information for future generations.
We'll produce the book, we'll produce the film, both called YMCA Rich History. We will ensure that all the material that we've researched and collected is stored and archived correctly. And what we'll finally do is we'll put all of that information into a time capsule and we will bury it as part of the Trinity campus development, that in 20, 30 years' time, the young people at that time might be inspired to dig it up and find out what was happening 20 or 30 years before. Maybe they might then start their project.
And now it's time for the weekly reflections, and this week it's Lee McMunn, Associate Minister from St John Newland in Hull.
I am a nervous flyer. I'm not one of the panicking flyers, but I do get nervous when I get the opportunity to fly. But I think one of the things that would make me really, really petrified is if I looked down the aisle, looked into the cockpit, and discovered that there was nobody at the controls. That's what happens in our lives as well, isn't it? So when we don't think anyone's in control of anything, then that's when the anxiety and the fear rises in our hearts. Now, for me as a Christian, when I look at the Bible, one of the great things I discover is that at the very heart of the universe is not a something, but a someone. Not a power, but a personality. And that is deeply assuring. It's not just blind faith, but the Bible assures me that there is a someone on the throne who sits in charge of everything, and that someone is a God who cares. Now, I don't know, as you look at the world, what's your confidence? But I would encourage you, you can look at the Bible and see that there is a someone at the very heart who's in control of everything.
Joining me on the sofa, Dan Kemp, to look through some of the weekend's news stories. Dan,
Good evening, Hugh.
Good evening, Dan. What have you found?
Well, we'll start off with a new bid to restore the time ball, which is right at the top of Hull Guildhall. It was there for ships to set the time by that were obviously going past up the River Hull, which is probably a couple of 100 metres away from where the Guildhall is. And there's been several attempts to try and restore it. In 2000 for the millennium, they tried to get a restoration plan going there. That didn't happen. In 2003, again, they tried to raise £50,000 to get it going again, and again it didn't happen.
Just a minute to describe what it is, a time ball. It's a great big sphere, a great big ball on a post on top of the building.
It's made of bronze.
So it's shiny.
Yes, very shiny.
And every hour, is it, I suppose? It just drops.
Yeah, every hour it drops.
Top to the bottom. And that's how you know that you're on the hour, and everybody knows.
Yes, that's exactly it. Councillor Stephen Brady, he's the leader of Hull City Council, said that it has the potential to restore the beautiful clock tower and return it to working order, which of course it was believed there only is one of less than 100 across the world. And they have actually replaced the bronze with, I think it's like a kind of a plasticky.
Okay, but it'll still look
naff
like it'll
item, but I think they want to restore it back to bronze.
You snob, a naff item on top of the Guildhall. As long as it looks fine, it's doing its job, isn't it?
It was bronze, now it's plastic. Obviously, it doesn't do its job. It's just there for decorative purposes now, but then they want to return it to bronze.
Okay,
that's what I'm saying.
Work still to be done.
Yes,
what else have we
got? The next story, this is in the Grimsby Telegraph, and this is that Cleethorpes Beach has been scoured after reports of fatal dog poisoning, which obviously doesn't sound great. Beach safety workers have carried out searches on the beach following reports that a dog died after being poisoned. There was an event going on there at the weekend, or was supposed to be going on there at the weekend, which Tonya Yates of Santa Paws, which is a good name, decided to call. She called off the charity walk after hearing the news that a dog had apparently died after eating a piece of food which had been laced with poison and was left on the beach.
Do we think this is deliberate? Somebody's trying deliberately to poison dogs?
Well, the Grimsby Telegraph reporting that it doesn't seem to be that way. Obviously, people are saying that they're confirmed, but they've not found anything to suggest that the dog was poisoned on the beach. So it's a link that someone's made, but we're not saying it's definitely happened on the beach. So they were just asking people to remain vigilant when walking the pets.
Work to be done on the chain of evidence
exactly,
there, I think. Yeah. What more?
Just keep an eye out.
Yes, just keep an eye out.
The next story, this is back to Hull. This is a new bar planned for an old shipping container on Hull Marina, which sounds like a very interesting concept. I know in London, obviously, they have boats on the Thames that are moored up that people can go and
they do, yes,
go and eat at. I think there was it Tattershall Castle?
The Tattershall Castle, which is the sister ship of the Lincoln Castle, which was so tragically taken to pieces in the docks at Grimsby just last year, I think.
Well, it's an idea, I suppose, based on that. And the owners of an Italian restaurant in Hull want to open a new waterfront cafe in a shipping container, which will have al fresco dining, obviously on the ship and also on the dockside as well.
A shipping container, as in one of those great big sort of corrugated iron boxes?
Well, that's what it says. I can't imagine that, can you?
I
can imagine if it was like a barge or something.
Turning a beautiful old paddle steamer into a restaurant has some sense, but turning okay, well, good luck to them.
And the idea here is Mr. Adami, who's the owner of the current site, he says that he'd like to see similar venues in shipping containers dotted around the city. So obviously it's maybe a longer term plan.
I suppose they'd be sort of nice little cafes, really, wouldn't they?
And obviously with City of Culture coming up in
Then
well, just
obviously
over
shipping containers are what we want to celebrate.
just over a year's time.
One more.
One more story. Yes, this is the Grimsby trailer, the latest Grimsby trailer, which I'm sure, I don't know if you've seen it or not.
Yeah, I haven't, I'm afraid.
There's one thing that I suppose has grabbed more people's attention than anything else, and this is the street sign, which is shown just for about a second on it, and it says Grimsby twinned with Chernobyl, Ukraine.
Right, I don't think that's true, but okay.
That, of course, has made some people a little bit upset about the way the town's been portrayed.
What sensitive people we are. Thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Time now for the sport.
Hull City returned to winning ways on Saturday with a 1-0 win over struggling Bolton Wanderers. Striker Chuba Akpom scored his first goal since October that lifted the Tigers to third in the Championship. The win was marred though with the returning captain Michael Dawson leaving the field in some discomfort before the end. Elsewhere, Scunthorpe United took a point away from home at Port Vale as Jack King scored the Irons' only goal. They remain 14th in League One. And Grimsby Town will need an FA Trophy replay to progress to the round 2 after being held on Saturday by National League North's Solihull Moors. James Allaby scored Town's goal to set up a replay on December the 22nd. Hull FC coach Lee Radford has told the Yorkshire Post that he's never felt more comfortable with his squad. It comes following the close season acquisitions of Frank Pritchard, Mahe Fanua, Carlos Tumiavave, Suka Manu, Danny Washbrook and Scott Taylor. Boxing now, Luke Campbell suffered his first professional defeat after being knocked out for the first time by experienced Frenchman Ivan Mendy. It was on the undercard of the Anthony Joshua Dillian White fight that saw Joshua win via knockout at the O2 in the main event on Saturday. And in Rugby Union, Hull FC's National League One struggles continue after they were beaten by a single point by Wharfdale. Meanwhile, Hull UFC's trip to Lymm was called off due to the weather, but Scunthorpe fared better, beating Bromsgrove 36-6. That's all the sport for now. You can contact us by emailing sport@estuary.tv or calling us on 01472 31553 or looking out for us on Facebook or Twitter. And that's all for the sport.
That's all for tonight. If you have a news story, then please visit our Facebook or Twitter pages. Details on the screen. Email news@estuary.tv or phone Grimsby 01472 31553. Until tomorrow, good evening.
Estuary TV weather, sponsored by Rix Petroleum, your local family-owned heating oil supplier this winter.
Hello and welcome to Estuary TV's weather. Tuesday will be mostly a cloudy day with hill fog and some light showers, then mainly dry with maximum temperatures of 9 degrees. Wednesday will be cloudy with some rain likely and drier than Tuesday.
Rix, servicing the region's oil boilers this winter from a name you can trust. Get in touch at rix.co.uk or call us on 01482 838383.